31 civilizations that vanished overnight. Here's something they don't mention in history class. Civilizations don't always fade gracefully. Sometimes they just disappear. One day they're building temples and writing poetry. The next day it's crickets and tumbleweeds. We're talking about thriving cultures that went from empire of the world to archaeological mystery faster than you can say, what the hell happened here? This isn't about slow decline. This is about societies that got the delete button treatment from history itself. Because if archaeology teaches us anything, it's that being on top is no guarantee you won't become a very expensive pile of rocks. Let that sink in. 1. The Minoans when paradise drowns. What if your entire Bronze Age empire disappeared because a volcano said, fuck this island in particular? The Minoan civilization on Crete was the crown jewel of the ancient Mediterranean around 1600 BC, boasting advanced plumbing, elaborate palaces, and art that would make modern galleries jealous. They dominated trade routes, had a written language we still can't fully decipher, and lived in what was basically ancient paradise. Then the Thera volcano on nearby, Santorini, decided to have the worst day ever. The eruption was so massive it triggered tsunamis that wiped out coastal settlements, buried entire cities in ash, and likely caused climate chaos across the region. The Minoans never recovered. Within a generation, their palaces were abandoned, their writing system forgotten, and their culture absorbed by the Mycenaeans. Imagine building a sophisticated civilization only to get volcano-punched into oblivion. 2. The Indus Valley plumbing over posterity. If your sewage system is better than your disaster planning, you might have a problem. The Indus Valley civilization flourished from 3300 to 1300 BCE across modern Pakistan and India, with cities like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa featuring advanced urban planning, standardized weights, and indoor plumbing that wouldn't be matched for millennia. We're talking about hundreds of cities with populations in the tens of thousands. Then, around 1900 BC, it just stopped. Cities were abandoned systematically, but there's no evidence of invasion, plague, or sudden catastrophe. The leading theory? Climate change dried up the rivers their agriculture depended on, and they migrated away rather than adapt. No great battle, no dramatic ending. They just walked away from cities that took centuries to build. It's the ancient equivalent of ghosting your entire civilization. 3. The Mycenaeans' Bronze Age collapse poster child. Here's a lesson in what happens when the whole neighborhood burns at once. The Mycenaeans dominated Greece from 1600 to 1100 BCE, building massive fortresses and inspiring Homer's epics. They were the Greeks before the Greeks, the culture that fought the Trojan War, the civilization behind Linear B writing. Then, around 1200 BCE, something catastrophic happened. Not just to them, but to every major Bronze Age civilization in the Eastern Mediterranean. Palaces burned, cities were abandoned, writing systems disappeared, and trade networks collapsed. Scholars call it the Late Bronze Age collapse, and the Mycenaeans were ground zero. Was it the mysterious sea peoples? Earthquakes? Drought? Internal rebellion? Yes, all of it. A perfect storm of disasters that reduced a sophisticated culture to scattered villages in less than a century. Bronze Age civilization hit the reset button, and the Mycenaeans couldn't find the save file. 4. Angkor, the city too big to sustain. If bigger is better, someone forgot to mention sustainability. Angkor, the capital of the Khmer Empire in Cambodia, was the largest pre-industrial city in the world during the 12th century, home to nearly 1 million people. The temple complexes like Angkor were engineering marvels, and their water management system was centuries ahead of its time. Then the system that made them great killed them. Their elaborate network of reservoirs and canals required constant maintenance. When climate patterns shifted in the 14th and 15th centuries, bringing both droughts and catastrophic floods, the infrastructure failed. The water system collapsed, agriculture tanked, and the population fled. By the time the city was rediscovered by European explorers in the 1800s, it had been swallowed by jungle for centuries. They built too big, too complex, and when one domino fell, they all went down. Urban planning meets Murphy's Law. 5. the Aksumite Empire, when your currency becomes archaeology. What if your empire was so forgotten that its coins became collector's items for archaeologists? The Aksumite Empire in modern Ethiopia and Eritrea was a major trading power from 100 to 940 CE, minting its own coins, building massive stone obelisks, and controlling trade routes between Africa, Arabia, and India. They were one of the great powers of their time, even mentioned by Persian and Roman sources. Then, in the 7th century, Islamic expansion cut off their trade routes. Climate change devastated their agriculture, and internal conflicts weakened their power. By 940 CE, the capital Aksum was abandoned, the empire fragmented, and they faded so completely from memory that later Ethiopians thought the obelisks were built by giants or spirits. From international superpower to archaeological footnote in a few generations. Trade routes stay undefeated. 6. Cahokia, America's forgotten metropolis. Here's a lesson in building a massive city and then just leaving. Cahokia, located near modern St. Louis, was the largest city in North America north of Mexico during its peak around 1100 CE, with an estimated population of 20,000 people. They built massive earthen mounds, some over 100 feet tall, established complex trade networks across the continent, and created a sophisticated urban center. Then, by 1350 CE, it was completely abandoned. No invasion, no written records of plague, just empty. The leading theories involve environmental degradation from deforestation, overhunting, and flooding. They may have literally used up all their resources. The city that once dominated the Mississippi Valley became a ghost town, and most Americans don't even know it existed. Sustainability matters, kids. 7. The Nabateans, when Rome needs your address. If your civilization's main feature is hard to invade, maybe diversify your economy. The Nabateans built the stunning city of Petra in modern Jordan around 300 BCE, carving elaborate facades into rose-red cliffs and controlling crucial trade routes. They mastered desert water management, grew wealthy taxing caravans, and lived in literal architectural poetry. Their wealth and independence lasted until 106 CE, when Roman Emperor Trajan said, "Cool rocks, mine now," and annexed them. But the real death blow came later when trade routes shifted and Petra's geographic isolation became a liability instead of an asset. Earthquakes in the 4th and 6th centuries damaged the infrastructure, and people gradually left. By the 7th century, Petra was abandoned, forgotten until it was rediscovered in 1812. From thriving trade hub to Indiana Jones movie set. 8. The ancestral Puebloans, cliff dwellings to nothing. What if you built elaborate cliff cities and then vanished, leaving archaeologists very confused? The ancestral Puebloans of the American Southwest built incredible cliff dwellings like those at Mesa Verde around 1200 CE. They had sophisticated agriculture using limited water, created stunning pottery, and built multi-story apartment complexes into canyon walls. Then, in the late 1200s, they abandoned these sites en masse. The mystery deepened because they left behind perfectly good homes, pottery, and infrastructure. Current evidence points to a severe drought known as the Great Drought of 1276 to 1299, combined with resource depletion and possibly conflict. They didn't disappear entirely. Their descendants became the modern Pueblo peoples. But the elaborate cliff cities? Ghost towns. Imagine packing up and leaving your apartment building carved into a cliff because the HOA fees got too high. 9. The Olmec, Mesoamerica's first ghosting. If you're going to be the mother culture of Mesoamerica, maybe stick around. The Olmec civilization emerged around 1600 BCE in southern Mexico, creating massive stone head sculptures, establishing the region's first major ceremonial centers, and influencing every later culture from the Maya to the Aztecs. They invented the Mesoamerican ball game, developed early hieroglyphic writing, and built impressive pyramids. Then, around 400 BCE, their major centers like San Lorenzo and La Vena were systematically abandoned. Some evidence suggests environmental changes, volcanic eruptions, or internal upheaval. But what's weird is that they didn't leave much explanation. No dramatic burn layers, no mass graves, just vacant cities. They basically invented Mesoamerican civilization and then pieced out without leaving forwarding information. 10. Teotihuacan, the city with no name. Here's a lesson in being so mysterious that even your name is a guess. Teotihuacan, near modern Mexico City, was one of the largest cities in the ancient world, peaking around 450 CE with over 100,000 residents. It featured massive pyramids, including the Pyramid of the Sun, sophisticated urban planning, and influence across Mesoamerica. We don't know what they called themselves, what language they spoke, or who ruled them. Then, around 550 CE, the city center was deliberately burned and abandoned. Evidence suggests internal revolt rather than external invasion. The city didn't die overnight, but its power collapsed and the population dispersed. By the time the Aztecs found it centuries later, it was already ancient ruins. They named it Teotihuacan, the place where the gods were created, because they had no idea who actually built it. Imagine being so thoroughly erased from history that future civilizations think deities built your apartment complex. 11. The Harappans, when uniformity becomes fragility. What if your civilization was so standardized that losing the system meant losing everything? The Harappan civilization of the Indus Valley had remarkable uniformity, from brick sizes to city planning to weights and measures across hundreds of miles. This standardization suggested strong central authority and cultural cohesion around 2000 BCE. Then the Indus River changed course, monsoon patterns shifted, and the whole system unraveled. Without their agricultural base, the standardized urban culture collapsed. By 1300 BCE, literacy disappeared, cities were abandoned, and people reverted to village life. The uniform culture that had been their strength became their weakness. When one part failed, everything failed. It's the ancient equivalent of having all your passwords be the same, then forgetting that one password. 12. The Hittites, when your secrets die with you. If you go to monopolize ironworking technology, maybe write it down. The Hittite Empire dominated Anatolia and challenged Egypt from 1600 to 1178 BCE. They pioneered ironworking, created one of the first known peace treaties, and built a powerful military machine. During the Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BCE, their capital Hattusa was burned and abandoned. The empire fragmented into smaller states. But here's the kicker. Their ironworking secrets disappeared with them. They'd kept it proprietary, a state secret, and when the state collapsed, the knowledge was lost. Later cultures had to reinvent it from scratch. Imagine being so protective of your intellectual property that you take it to the grave, leaving everyone else to figure out metallurgy via trial and error. 13. Rapa Nui, Easter Island, self-inflicted isolation. Here's a lesson in what happens when you're stuck on an island and run out of trees. The Polynesian settlers of Rapa Nui created a sophisticated culture around 1200 CE, famous for the massive moai stone statues they carved and transported across the island. At its peak, the population may have reached 15,000. Then they cut down all the trees. Every single one. Without trees, they couldn't build boats, couldn't fish effectively, soil eroded, and crops failed. The population crashed to around 2,000 by the 1700s, and rival clans fought over dwindling resources. When Europeans arrived in 1722, they found a struggling population and toppled statues, evidence of societal collapse. The culture that built those incredible monuments destroyed itself through resource depletion. It's the ultimate read the room failure, except the room is an isolated island, and reading it means not cutting down your last tree. 14. Great Zimbabwe, when your walls outlast your memory. What if you built massive stone structures and your own descendants forgot how? Great Zimbabwe flourished from 1100 to 1450 CE as the capital of a powerful trading empire in southern Africa. The stone walls, built without mortar, were architectural marvels, and the city controlled gold and ivory trade routes. At its peak, 18,000 people lived there. Then the gold sources were exhausted, trade routes shifted, overgrazing and deforestation damaged the environment, and the political center moved elsewhere. By 1450, the city was largely abandoned. When European colonizers found it centuries later, they refused to believe Africans could have built it and invented ridiculous theories about Phoenicians or the Queen of Sheba. The culture that built it was so thoroughly disrupted by colonialism that the knowledge of construction techniques was nearly lost. From trading empire to racist conspiracy theories, history stays classy. 15. The Silla Kingdom, when unity becomes liability. If three kingdoms unite and become one, what happens when that one collapses? The Silla Kingdom unified the Korean peninsula in 668 CE, creating centuries of relative stability and cultural flourishing. Buddhism thrived, arts prospered, and Gyeongju became one of the world's largest cities. But by the 9th century, the centralized system was cracking. Aristocratic power struggles, peasant rebellions, and the rise of powerful local lords fragmented the kingdom. In 935 CE, Silla was overthrown by Goryeo, which would give Korea its name. The transition was relatively peaceful, but Silla's cultural and political system essentially vanished overnight. The Buddhist temples remained, but the political structure, the aristocracy, and the court culture dissolved. Unity cut both ways. Once the center failed, there was nothing holding it together. 16. Tiwanaku, when your lake level drops. Here's a lesson in betting everything on one water source. Tiwanaku, near Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, was a major Andean power from 300 to 1000 CE, with a population possibly reaching 40,000. They developed sophisticated raised field agriculture, carved monumental stone gateways, and established trade networks across the Andes. Their agriculture depended on Lake Titicaca's predictable water levels. Then, around 1000 CE, a severe drought lowered the lake, devastated their raised fields, and the agricultural base collapsed. The city was abandoned, the empire fragmented, and the population dispersed to areas with more reliable water. When Spanish chroniclers recorded local legends centuries later, people described Tiwanaku as having been built by giants in a single night. The actual builders were so forgotten that mythology filled the gap. Hydrology stays undefeated. 17. The Mississippians, mound builders to mystery. What if your culture built hundreds of earthen pyramids and then just stopped? The Mississippian culture peaked from 800 to 1600 CE across the southeastern United States, building massive earthen mounds for ceremonies and elite residences. Sites like Cahokia, Moundville, and Etowah were regional centers of power. Then, starting around 1450, these centers were systematically abandoned. A combination of climate change, resource depletion, disease, and the early indirect effects of European contact, diseases spreading ahead of actual colonizers, likely caused the collapse. By the time European explorers arrived in the 1500s, many sites were already abandoned, and the survivors had dispersed into smaller communities. The elaborate mound-building culture that had defined the region for centuries was already a fading memory. Environmental limits and disease wrote the ending. 18. The Khmer Empire, when your capital becomes a jungle. If maintaining your water system requires more effort than your economy can support, you're screwed. The Khmer Empire, centered at Angkor, was discussed earlier, but the broader empire's collapse deserves its own mention. Beyond Angkor, the Khmer controlled much of Southeast Asia from the 9th to 15th centuries. But as Angkor declined, so did the empire. Thai kingdoms invaded from the west, climate instability wrecked agriculture, and the conversion to Theravada Buddhism shifted power away from the God King system. By 1431, Angkor was sacked by Ayutthaya forces, and the capital moved south to Phnom Penh. The once mighty empire fractured into smaller kingdoms. The jungle reclaimed Angkor so thoroughly that later generations thought it was built by gods or giants. From controlling Southeast Asia to being a legend in your own land. Maintenance matters. 19. Poverty Point, America's oldest complex society goes silent. Here's a lesson in building something impressive 3,000 years before anyone expects you to. Poverty Point in Louisiana was a massive earthwork complex built around 1650 to 700 BCE, featuring concentric ridges and mounds covering 400 acres. They imported raw materials from across North America, created sophisticated tools, and supported a large population without agriculture. Then, around 700 BCE, the site was abruptly abandoned. No clear evidence of warfare, no obvious environmental catastrophe. They just left. Some scholars suggest a major flood or environmental shift, but the archaeological record is frustratingly silent. They built one of North America's first monumental centers and then walked away, leaving later cultures to wonder what the hell those mounds were for. Pre-agricultural urban planning for the win, sustainability for the loss. 20. The Paiute city-states, when your buffer zone disappears. What if your entire civilization existed to be between two bigger powers? The Paiute city-states in Myanmar flourished from 200 BCE to 900 CE, acting as a cultural and trade bridge between India and China. They built walled cities, practiced Buddhism, and minted their own coins. They were prosperous intermediaries in the regional trade network. Then the Nanzhao kingdom from the north raided and destroyed their major cities in the 830 CE. The Paiute didn't recover. Their cities were abandoned, their culture absorbed by the later Bamar people, and their language went extinct. Within a few generations, the Paiute city-states were archaeological sites. Being the middleman only works if both sides leave you alone. Geopolitics has no mercy. 21. The Wari Empire, when climate says no. If your empire depends on highland agriculture, pray the rain keeps coming. The Wari Empire in Peru from 500 to 1000 CE built roads, administrative centers, and distinctive pottery that influenced later Andean cultures. They managed to control diverse ecological zones from coast to highlands. Then, around 1000 CE, a prolonged drought hammered the Andes. The Wari's agricultural base collapsed. Their administrative centers were abandoned, and the empire fragmented. There's evidence of increasing violence and warfare in the final decades, suggesting desperate competition for dwindling resources. By 1100 CE, Wari was a memory, though their infrastructure and cultural practices influenced the later Inca. They built the roads the Inca would later expand, but never got to see the payoff. Climate stays undefeated. 22. The Dilmun civilization, when your middleman services aren't needed. Here's a lesson in being really good at one thing, then that thing becoming obsolete. Dilmun, centered on modern Bahrain, thrived from 300 to 600 BCE as a crucial trading hub between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. They were the middlemen of the Bronze Age, controlling trade in copper, pearls, and other goods. Their prosperity was entirely dependent on being the necessary link in the chain. Then trade routes changed. Empires rose and fell, and by 600 BC, Dilmun had been absorbed by various larger powers and lost its independent identity. The culture that had prospered for millennia as the essential middleman became irrelevant when direct trade became easier. It's the ancient version of being disrupted by Amazon. Your business model only works until someone figures out they don't need you. 23. The Mosh, when your gods don't stop the flood. What if you sacrifice everything to your gods and they don't return the favor? The Mosh civilization on Peru's northern coast from 100 to 800 CE created stunning pottery, built massive pyramids, and practiced elaborate rituals, including human sacrifice. They had a sophisticated irrigation system that turned desert into farmland. Then El Niño events in the 6th century brought catastrophic floods that destroyed their irrigation infrastructure. Afterwards, drought and sandstorms buried fields. Archaeological evidence shows increasing violence and human sacrifice in the final period, suggesting desperate attempts to appease angry gods. By 800 CE, the major Mosh sites were abandoned and the population fragmented. Their descendants continued in smaller polities, but the unified Mosh culture was finished. Prayer and sacrifice couldn't fix failed infrastructure. 24. The Gupta Empire, when Huns come knocking. If your golden age has an expiration date, this is what it looks like. The Gupta Empire in India from 320 to 550 CE is considered a golden age of arts, science, and literature. They made advances in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Sanskrit literature flourished. Then the Hephthalite Huns invaded from the northwest in the 5th century. The empire spent enormous resources fighting them, weakening central authority. Regional governors became independent, the economy tanked, and by 550 CE, the empire had fragmented into warring kingdoms. The cultural achievements continued, but the political unity was shattered. The Gupta brand was so strong that later rulers claimed connection to them, but the actual empire? Dead and buried in less than a century of decline. Golden ages don't last. 25. The Kukutini Tripilia culture, burn and run. Here's a lesson in having the weirdest exit strategy in archaeology. The Kukutini Tripilia culture in Eastern Europe from 5500 to 2750 BCE built some of the largest Neolithic settlements in the world, with towns holding thousands of people. Then, every 60 to 80 years, they'd burn their entire settlement to the ground and build a new one nearby. Archaeologists debate whether this was ritual, pest control, or accidental. Around 2750 BCE, they stopped building new settlements and dispersed. Climate change and the arrival of Indo-European pastoralists likely disrupted their agricultural lifestyle. The culture that had persisted for millennia vanished, absorbed into the waves of migration sweeping the region. From massive planned settlements to scattered villages in a few generations. Their intentional burning made their end less dramatic, but no less complete. 26. Old Kingdom Egypt, when even pharaohs can't control everything. What if you're building pyramids and then suddenly you can't afford bread? Egypt's Old Kingdom from 2686 to 2181 BCE was the age of the Great Pyramids, powerful pharaohs, and centralized authority. Then the 6th dynasty collapsed around 2181 BCE, ushering in the first intermediate period of chaos. Low Nile floods caused famine. Provincial governors stopped sending taxes to the capital and declared independence, and central authority evaporated. For over a century, Egypt was fractured into competing kingdoms. The culture didn't disappear, but the unified state did. When it was reunited in the Middle Kingdom, they'd lost the ability to build pyramids on the Old Kingdom scale. The Golden Age was over, and they knew it. Even divine kings can't fight climate change and bad harvests. 27. The Turpan Kingdom, when the Silk Road closes. If your entire economy is people passing through, what happens when they stop? The various kingdoms in the Turpan Depression of Western China thrived as Silk Road oases from roughly 200 BCE to 1200 CE. They were the rest stops of the ancient world, providing water, supplies, and safety for caravans. Buddhist monasteries flourished, multiple languages coexisted, and cultures mixed. Then the Mongols conquered the region, trade patterns shifted, and later the Ming dynasty restricted overseas trade. As the Silk Road declined, so did Turpan. The elaborate cave temples were abandoned, cities declined, and the multicultural cosmopolitan culture faded. The oasis kingdoms that had prospered for over a millennium became backwaters. When the highway closes, the truck stop dies. 28. The Kingdom of Kush, when your conqueror needs a timeout. Here's a lesson in being conquered so hard you forget your own writing. The Kingdom of Kush in Nubia rivaled Egypt for centuries, even conquering Egypt itself in the 8th century BCE. They built pyramids, developed their own writing system, Meroitic script, and controlled trade routes in the Nile Valley. Then, in 350 CE, the Kingdom of Aksum from modern Ethiopia invaded and destroyed the capital Meroe. The kingdom fragmented, Meroitic script was lost, we still can't fully read it, and the culture was absorbed by Christian Nubian kingdoms. Within a few generations, the proud civilization that had challenged the pharaohs became a historical footnote. The pyramids remained, but the knowledge of who built them and what they wrote faded. Conquest can erase more than just borders. 29. The Thracians, when everyone wants your real estate. What if you're stuck between Rome, Macedonia, and various tribal invasions. The Thracians occupied the Balkans from roughly 1000 BCE until Roman conquest in the 1st century CE. They were skilled metal workers, fierce warriors, and had a rich culture. Orpheus, the legendary musician, was supposedly Thracian, but they never unified into a single state, remaining a collection of tribes. This made them vulnerable. Philip of Macedon, Alexander the Great, and finally Rome conquered them piecemeal. By the 1st century CE, Thrace was a Roman province. The language died out by the 5th century CE, replaced by Slavic languages and Latin. The culture that produced Spartacus and influenced Greek mythology was absorbed so thoroughly that most people today don't even know they existed. Location between empires is a curse, not a blessing. 30. The Sea Peoples, when the invaders themselves disappear. If you're going to cause a civilizational collapse, at least stick around to enjoy it. The Sea Peoples are the most mysterious entry on this list because we don't know who they were or where they came from. They appear in Egyptian records around 1200 BCE as coalition of naval raiders who attacked Egypt, destroyed the Hittite Empire, devastated coastal cities across the Eastern Mediterranean, and contributed to the Bronze Age collapse. Then they vanished from history. Some may have settled in places like Philistia, modern Palestine, but their original identity, language, and culture are lost. They destroyed civilizations and then disappeared themselves. It's the ultimate historical irony. The civilization destroyers becoming another civilization that vanished. Even the apocalypse crew couldn't survive the apocalypse. 31. The Etruscans, when Rome decides you're Italian now. Here's a lesson in being conquered by your own former subjects. The Etruscans dominated central Italy from 900 to 27 BCE, influencing early Rome with their architecture, religion, and even their alphabet. They were the sophisticated neighbors who taught the Romans how to be civilized. Then Rome, which started as an Etruscan city, overthrew its Etruscan kings in 509 BCE and began conquering Etruscan cities one by one. By 27 BCE, Etruria was fully absorbed into the Roman Empire. The Etruscan language died out, replaced by Latin. Their culture was assimilated so completely that by the time of the empire, they were just those people who used to live here. The civilization that created Roman civilization was erased by its own creation. It's the ultimate student surpasses teacher story, except the student murders the teacher and takes all the credit. And there you have it. 31 civilizations that went from thriving to archaeologists arguing over pottery shards faster than you can say, wait, what happened? From volcanoes to droughts, from invasion to running out of trees, from climate change to simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's a reminder that no matter how impressive your pyramids, how sophisticated your plumbing, or how extensive your trade networks, extinction is always one bad century away. Every one of these cultures thought they'd last forever. Spoiler alert, they didn't. So which collapse shocked you the most? Which civilization would you have tried to save? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this journey through humanity's greatest disappearing acts entertained you, hit that like button and subscribe for more history that proves we're all just one drought away from becoming a very interesting dig site. Stay humble out there.